it's horrible for our democracy. And I'm not talking about the redistricting thing. It's horrible for our democracy because if the less competitive seats you have, the more people will only have to worry about losing in a primary, and it will drive them to the far left of the Democratic Party and the far right of the Republican Party. There'll be no common sense folks looking for ways to solve problems in the middle, and it's just going to exacerbate, if I use that word right, the fucking problem we got right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast, coming you from a still shut down Washington, D.C. And Mike Madrid, you should know, not only did I bring back 2 extra pounds from Texas, I brought back a brand new Mexican burnt palm hat for you YouTube listeners. Are you in Mexico?
I am. A Mexican burnt palm hat.
Yeah, look at the camera. Hang on, let me do it this way.
Yeah.
See where it says genuine Mexican palm?
I see what says resistor.
Right below it. Genuine Mexican palm.
Huh.
Burnt palm. That's what has these burnt marks on it. I thought I better buy one before Donald Trump tries to deport all the Mexican hats.
Or tariff Mexican palm, whatever that means.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, no, I am in Mexico. I am down here for the week handling some business, as it were. But I'm glad you made it back in. I don't know if I will with this kind of new Kristi Noem messages being played at TSA. Did you have trouble getting back in?
Did you see them?
I saw. When I left, they were definitely, the new ones were out, and I could see her mud kind of telling us stuff, but I couldn't hear it because there were so many people going through. I think we turned the volume down too. I think TSA is a little embarrassed themselves. They're turning it down.
I'll tell you what I heard when I was home in Texas, and we're going to talk about my trip to Texas. But on the country music station, which is like out of Central Caston here, there was a Kristi Noem ICE recruitment radio commercial, like join us, get a bonus, get some pay raises. Do y'all got those out in California?
I'm sure we probably do, but probably not as aggressive as Texas. That's probably good recruiting ground. We should probably do a whole section on Kristi Noem and what's happening with DHS. But just for clarification too, what we were talking about earlier going through the airport was, Kristi Noem's overtly now changed her message on these new videos when you go through any airport, saying it's the Democratic left that we're checking you for, and that is the biggest threat to the country, and that's why we're checking you through TSA. I mean, it's like it's become this circus of the absurd in how they're actually starting to go and attack our own people. If you don't agree with the regime, you are suddenly somehow suspect, and I guess a threat to the country.
To me, it is the most blatant exercise in being illegal because of the Hatch Act. And let me tell my little story, which is, for those of you who don't know, I make these kind of videos for congressmen who want to go back to their districts and talk to their constituents about trying to reach out to the office. Maybe they have a VA claim, they have a Social Security claim, they need help in the office. So the federal government, you should all know, allocates money to each congressional office. It's somewhere around $300,000. It used to be like $1 million per office, but they've been whittled down to about $300. It's called the franking budget because it's named after a fellow named Frank. Well, when I make these ads, TV ads, radio ads, digital ads, mail pieces, it has to go through a litany, if I use that word right, of all of these lawyers who have to make sure that there's nothing political in it at all. Mike Madrid, I can't even, when I send a mail to people based off of their party registration. That's how astringent they are. But she can say that you're in TSA line and we're keeping it going, even though the Democrats have shut down our government. That's some bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know that she can do that. I think the question gets back to who's going to say anything about it when they're the enforcement mechanism.
That's right.
Right, which they know. And that whole Hatch Act, I mean, it's great that Congress follows it, at least for the moment, because the president of the United States clearly does not. I remember the Republican National Convention in 2020 was held on the lawn of the White House. We forget this stuff. This is the violations of the Hatch Act, which, by the way, for our listeners that don't know what the Hatch Act is, the Hatch Act is the body of law that basically says taxpayer dollars cannot be used for electoral or political purposes. And when I was doing a lot of candidate work, we were extremely, extremely sensitive. One, because we didn't want to get in trouble with the law, but two, just as importantly, it's just not right. You don't use the power of the government to campaign and to politic. Well, all that's been thrown out the window. Like nobody, when the executive branch of the government is in charge of enforcement and doesn't care about enforcing it and violates it for its own purposes, its own volition, has Donald Trump sit in front of the Lincoln Memorial to tape a political campaign ad or to do town halls for his reelection efforts. He did that too. This is the Hatch Act is essentially meaningless. It handcuffs members of Congress. What we're at in American history is the only people who are hampered by the Hatch Act are those that follow the law in the first place.
It's a great point, and it reminds me of one more thing since we're down this rabbit hole. Is last night I did this seminar with a group, it's a webinar, with a group of AFGE union members. They're the government employees union that represent all federal workers. Can you imagine how much they've been devastated? They ended the last day of Hispanic Heritage Month by having me come on and talk about the history of the Latinos in the U.S. labor movement. And I was an honor to do it. I did it, but it made me think when I was on that call, Mike, because we are old and we think about things when we're on there. I was reminded, to your point about the Hatch Act, and I brought this up last night, when I used to organize at the Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio when I was running a special election for Congress down there in the 90s. We would go out to the AFGE worksite to put out leaflets to ask them to vote for the Democrat that was going to be running. You had to go across the street from the federal facility where these people worked and try to catch them after they got off the property because of the Hatch Act. I couldn't literally stand on U.S. government property and hand them a political leaflet from their own union, paid for by their own union, not the campaign. This was a flyer made by the union saying the union endorses Joe. That's how stringent it was 30 years ago. They'd thrown all that shit out. To Mike's point, they filmed a commercial at the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, this is a brave new world. And like I said, this stuff happens by drips. It doesn't happen all in one fell swoop. We have to realize it's crazy, Chuck, when you stop and think about how different the country is from 2016, from when all this madness started. Not just the craziness in our brains and the constant barrage of information, but stuff like that, where just the rules of the game, no one's changed any laws related to the Hatch Act, but nobody follows them, pays attention to them.
Nobody's going to enforce them.
And no one's afraid of enforcement. That's exactly right.
Well, let's stay on this subject of Texas because I want to hit on this before I forget, before we move on to some world and real political events. Taking off this hat. This straw is hot. Mexicans make them.
I want to know how the homecoming went.
It was epic. I don't know if there's enough words to tell you. Now, Ebony Payne was blown away because she had never been to a high school football game. Now, for all of you nerds, you should know that in D.C., if you go to the real smarty pants school where all the smart kids go, there's no sports program because you make all your time in art and learning things. My school was the opposite. We spent all of our time in the sports and screw that learning shit, right? As you can tell from this podcast every week. So the cool thing was I got to go home and I was around about 15 of my buddies who all got together. We went home for homecoming. We hadn't done that in 20 years. We played golf afterwards, but it was so cool for me to watch Ebony's reaction because at some point she was like, oh my God, the mums girls were wearing because it was homecoming. Now they have shoulder straps for them and there's mums over their whole chest. So that was great. And then she was blown away. She's like, oh my God, there's real cheerleaders here like the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And I was like, well, not quite exactly like the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, but they're cheerleaders. And then there was this festivity before the game where they crowned the homecoming queen and the homecoming king. Their parents were on the field. Moms were out there. They had a drill team. Now, I'm used to all this. That's just Friday night for me. I played on these days. But to watch my wife's reaction reminded me, now not everybody got to live through the experience that I got to live through every Friday night where you had a couple thousand people in a high school football stadium watching football. So it went really good. It was good to see my friends. It was good to go golfing the day after. I actually got to play golf, Mike, with my football coach.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that video clip. It was great.
And so then we went to my buddy's house. And I guess
your nickname was Cucaracha.
He called me
Cacarocha.
Like these are all white boys. Then he Caca. And I had all this hair. I went up to the press booth and I got to hang out in the press booth with some of the boys. And with all that being said, it reminded me that, all these guys are Republican, very, very Republican. Some of them are big, big MAGA. there's only one guy who may be kind of a Democrat, and that's because we had a conversation. He's in the railroad union, and he's still a redneck, but he understands the importance of a union because he's in the railroad union for 30 years.
Yeah.
So he's a light, moderate Democrat, if you will. But I was thinking, nobody talked to anybody about what was going on in the Middle East. Nobody was talking about the government shutdown. There's no doubt that these boys would never blame Republicans for a damn thing. Everything has got to be the Democrats' fault. Like, these are true blue believers. But I was thinking the whole time there how much we all got along and how we may all have different political beliefs. A lot of these guys go to church every Sunday. A lot of these guys have, come from being very poor to building construction companies and heating and air conditioning companies and working on the railroad like Billy does. And Chance was the valedictorian. He works in a rural hospital in West Texas with his brother, where there are only two of only four doctors, Mike, there. Big Republican, big Catholic. And, we all got along. We all love each other. We all had a great weekend. And I think that the civility of how much we do love each other shone through. And it reminded me of how, if we're off social media and we're all looking at people for who we are, we all have plenty of ways for us to get along, especially when you grow up with neighbors with people. When algorithms would teach us we have to hate each other because of red or blue, it was a weekend where I really felt connected to my boys, even though they're Republican and they may have different beliefs than me.
Can I make an observation about the whole thing?
Sure.
I first of all, it was great to kind of watch you. You're excited to go back and see some family pictures and your friends. And I thought that was fantastic. It was great to get to know you a little bit better, at least through pictures and a couple of videos. I was particularly taken aback by a couple of images. The first was kind of you did a video by your old working plant, your old tire plant where you used to work. And then you kind of showed the Union Hall, which was basically gone now. It's for sale, I think. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Back home in East Texas on Highway 31, this over here is the old factory where I used to work, Kelly Springfield Tire Company. That factory was shut down over 20 years ago, and they moved all that tire production to China. 1,500 men and women lost their job there, including my dad and a lot of my uncles. And across the street right here was the Union Hall. And the Union Hall was where we did all of our union business. Now, it's for sale. The retirees kept it going for a while, but they're shutting it down now. This is where I come from. And this is what's wrong with our politics. When we turn our back on American workers, this is what's wrong with America. We got to get back to making things here and stand up for these workers who used to work in that plant and go to this Union Hall where I became the youngest officer of that local when I was 22. It's good to be back home. It's good to be reminiscing. It's also a little sad. Y'all be good.
And then I remember going, okay, there's like some economic, issues here in this town. Like, this is not real wealthy country. These are salt of the earth working people. These are people who work with their hands. And then you showed pictures of that football stadium. And I was like, that's a damn nice stadium. They invested a hell of a lot of money into that football stadium, which again, I'm not going to be judgmental of it. I'm not going to be critical of it. That's just the way life is in those parts of rural Texas. Like, that is the most important thing that keeps the community going. That's where budgets are a statement of priorities. That's your values. That's where you're going to put that money. But I got to tell you, I was impressed. I was like, that stadium cost a lot of money. That was a really nice football stadium out in rural Texas.
That's the same stadium that I played in. And the way that they made that on a budget is they play on the same field. And what they did is they put the AstroTurf over our old field, but they didn't move it. And they made the stands bigger by tearing down the old rock gym. But down behind me, they have built a state-of-the-art now arts center and high school. But that's rural East Texas. That's about 15 miles east of where I was in Tyler. And I did go to the plant where I was working in the Union Hall. To Mike's point, if you follow my social media, I wanted folks to be able to have a visual of what I talk about. And for a lot of my haters out there on the internet to say, oh, Chuck's not just making all this shit up, because also I sent Mike and Andreas pictures of the trailer house where I grew up, where my 15-year-old mother raised two kids in this tiny little trailer that's in the middle of the woods that I took Ebony by. That was also important for me to show her that this is a real place. And this is what the community looks like, which are a bunch of other trailer houses and working poor people who are just out here trying to make it work. And, she really understood me. Obviously, she married me, but getting to see it. And then finally, the last day, I went and spent the first 2 days with all my redneck buddies, and we had a great time at the football and playing golf and going over to Stan's. Thanks to Stan and his wife, Stacy, for hosting us for dinner that night. But the next day, I got to see my dad's people and all of my Mexican family. And you saw the pictures that I sent you and Andreas of. I got to see 6 of the remaining 7 siblings. My dad had 15 brothers and sisters, lots of aunts and uncles who came over to the community center. We all got together and just hung out for a few hours and got to see each other, right? And my Uncle Rick, who worked at the mill, my Uncle Dan, who worked at the mill, a lot of my cousins who worked at that same place that you saw the video. So my Ricky, who we grew up together, the union got him some education at the local junior college, Mike. And then now he's a football coach at a middle school in Tyler.
Okay.
My Uncle Dan, who had been in the plant for 25 years, ended up retiring, took an early retirement, and the union guaranteed him a pension. So he got that. And so, my other cousin became a landman. So folks have figured out in this industry how to make it. But the manufacturing in my town has pretty much been decimated through trade policies. Hence why when you hear me talk about trade and talk about tariffs and talk about things, it's because I've been impacted personally. But I appreciate you living through that little journey with me this weekend.
Yeah, I was like kind of flipping through your Facebook page there for a moment. I was joking with you and Andreas about that. But let's also keep something in mind. This is, as Chuck said, this is Republican country. It's red and getting redder now.
There are no Democrats elected where I'm from.
There are no Democrats elected from those areas, which is, people of a certain age, Chuck and mine, like that's peculiar. Like that was poor working class white folks who worked with their hands and were affected by trade policy and tariffs. Those people used to be absolutely Democrats to the bone, hardcore Democrats. Not all. Let me
interrupt you and say that in 1995, that's not that long ago. Is that 30 years ago?
Yeah, NAFTA.
Every county official in Henderson Smith County was a Democrat. We had a Democratic congressman who came in from Dallas with a little arm, and a lot of county commissioners and local sheriffs and all those guys were Democrats. That all changed 30 years ago.
So the coalitions in both parties, like I said, are completely different. And there you go. I mean, Chuck's life trajectory, his arc. If I went back and, did the same thing in my home county, you'd see the exact same thing. There's just a big change. Things are just not what they were. And that's a big part of what we explore here. And Latinos, of course, are very central to that. Are there more Latinos in that area now, Chuck? Are there more Hispanics or no?
Yes. So in the northern part of Tyler is where the black community was segregated before segregation. They had their own black high school up there and stuff in Tyler. After segregation, they would stay in North Tyler where they would elect one county commissioner and one city councilman out of like 6, so that they were all concentrated. The black folks still live there. There's not as many of them. All the youth, all the black youth. So it's a real old community. Guess who's filled that void? Latinos. Yeah. Latinos all moved into North Tyler. My family, the Rochas and the Martinezes, were the first 2 Latino families to move up there with the black folks in the 50s and 60s. And so my grandmother Rocha, who I put a picture up of, I send you and Andreas, she lived in far North Tyler, which now is all Latino, used to be all black. It's just changed overnight.
Yeah. This is bringing up an issue that is going to become really, really, really big in the next couple of weeks, which is the Voting Rights Act. Everyone's been, kind of lighting their hair on fire. At least people that still have hair, not like Chuck and I, but the Prop 50 campaign in California to redistrict, all of these pickups in Texas that the Republicans are trying to draw Republicans out of. There's a far, far bigger issue looming. And that is this court case in the next couple of weeks that's going to determine whether Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act will remain intact. And I think it's very, very unlikely that it will. Meaning I think that the Supreme Court is going to throw out these minority district protections.
What does that mean, Mike? If they do it, what does it mean?
It means that there will no longer be a legal justification to create black districts or Latino districts, which I thought of that because you mentioned Tyler, Texas, and segregation, and kind of one black person on a council of 6 is kind of the model that we used as a country to kind of force representation. It was both good and bad. The good part was there was black representation. The bad part, it was usually locked all into one district. So it was just one vote that wasn't going to get any real decision-making process or have any sway in the way votes were decided in terms of policy to affect the community. All of this to say is I read some numbers yesterday. If the voting rights gets tossed out, it will mean a Republican pickup in the House of about 19-20 seats. That's crazy. Like, that is nuts. That is a game changer. All of this redistricting brouhaha that we're fighting about right now will be completely meaningless. And the odds of the Supreme Court throwing out the Voting Rights Act, I would probably say, is 90% plus. It's going to happen. They're going to get rid of it. So the old notions of having black districts, Latino districts for representation purposes is going to be tossed out. That is going to dramatically transform the way the House of Representatives works. It's going to change the way minority districts look because they won't exist anymore. Doesn't mean there won't be minority representatives, but they're going to become much, much more competitive, much, much more compact in terms of Latinos and blacks in the same districts running against each other. And it's going to be probably a 20-seat loss for Democrats heading into the 2026 midterms.
And a 20-seat loss, y'all, you should know that in any given year, except in the year that we're in right now, there's normally not ever going to be, if the current maps stay the way they are, ever a swing of 20 or 30 seats one way or the other. You'll see a 10 or 15 seat swing, maybe. But if what Mike is saying and they move 20, then you're going to see even less swing districts. You'll never see a majority of more than probably 15, but it'll always be Republican because they've just submitted their power for a long time. I would draw your attention to something that Mike's talking about that he may not know about, but I know a lot about, which is happening in real time, which is this redistricting in Texas, specifically in Dallas, Mike. They took that Fort Worth district and they moved it and they did away with it to create a new district. And in Dallas now, there's only 2 core Democratic districts. They did away with the new maps if they get these new maps, Mike. One is a majority black district, and it's the one that it's South Dallas, and then there's one just above it that's a little bit to the east. That's a majority Hispanic seat, and they are super compact, super Democrats. That's how they made everything around them very much more Republican and pick up 2 seats there. The one in Fort Worth and the one Julie Johnson had that moved east towards Tyler. Who is the young black congresswoman? Jasmine Crockett. So Jasmine's in Dallas. Mark Vesey's in Dallas and had the Fort Worth seat that ran between. So he's drawn out. Julie Johnson was drawn out, even though she has the gay part of downtown Dallas and everything east. Now these 3 have to decide how they split up 2 seats. Now, what I hear is going to happen is Mark Vesey, because he lives in Fort Worth, he may stay over there and run for county judge. But the real district, and I think Julie Johnson's going to run in the Hispanic seat because it still takes in this very this gay part of Dallas, which is very big, and she's gay and married to a wonderful woman. But here's what made me think of it. There's rumors that Jasmine Crockett, who actually lives in the Hispanic one, may run there because black people in that district actually still outvote Latinos, even though it's a Latino majority district. You know this well, which would open up some other black person, African American, to run in the southern seat, so they'd have 2 African Americans and force Julie out. So these are just things that are happening. But think if what Mike says and they throw out the voting rights. What does that do to these 2 seats? Because they're the last 2 in Dallas. Like, that's where this becomes real.
That's where this becomes real, and it changes gerrymandering entirely because nobody has to draw maps with a big qualifier of they have to meet Voting Rights Act criteria. You throw that out. You can make it as Democrat or as Republican as you want. A Republican state like Texas, you don't need to have any black or brown districts. You can dilute all of it as much as you want in order to get the Republican outcome you want if you're in Texas. And Democrats can do the same thing in states like California, where you could have all Republicans, an all Republican House delegation from Texas and an all Democratic House delegation coming from Texas. And if you don't think that that's going to happen, I mean, that's going to happen. Like, there's no other way to do it.
And let me just say this is that it's horrible for our democracy. And I'm not talking about the redistricting thing. It's horrible for our democracy because if the less competitive seats you have, the more people will only have to worry about losing in a primary, and it will drive them to the far left of the Democratic Party and the far right of the Republican Party. There'll be no common sense folks looking for ways to solve problems in the middle, and it's just going to exacerbate, if I use that word right, the fucking problem we got right now. Right, Mike?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to back up a little bit because you said something really interesting about like Jasmine Crockett running in a Hispanic district, which is where she lives. This is a really fascinating dynamic that is just going to start hitting other parts of the country. Texas has probably experienced this for some time. California's been dealing with it since the 1990s. there are a lot of just what you explained in Tyler, Texas, where these old areas that used to be African-American, that used to be Black in the 1950s because of segregation, segregated neighborhoods, just like South Central Los Angeles, started to change 30, 40 years later with immigration issues and Latinos coming in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. A lot of these are Latino majority neighborhoods, but Latinos don't vote at the same rate. We can get into the who, what, where, what, as and whys, and we probably should on a future episode. But what we have seen through the course of the past few decades is a real disparity between power structures where Black power structures are still winning in these districts that are overwhelmingly Latino Hispanic communities. I'm not going to get into whether that's good or bad, but what it is it is. We have to recognize that is common. It's not an uncommon dynamic. It's happening all over the place, and it's happening with more and more frequency as Latinos start to kind of gentrify, or Latino, whatever the Latino gentrification word is, in Black communities as the Latino population explodes and the Black population numbers stay the same. So what we're seeing is these two different power structures. And frankly, there's some resentment in the Black community as these communities change. And there is sort of this frustration with Latinos and Latino politicians who have not been able to galvanize enough voters in their communities to unseat Black politicians, even though they're overwhelmingly in the same party. I don't want to overstate it by calling it conflict, but it's definitely tension. And it's been documented, and there's newspaper articles and books written about it for many, many years. This Black-Brown struggle to define what minority means, whose power structure matters. Barragan went through a really, really tough battle. The last election cycle is the first Latino representing what used to be a Black district, even though it's been a Latino majority district for 20 years. Like all of this, the questions as to who's a better representative, who should be in control, oftentimes becomes just a battle between cliques of Democrats who are going to vote the same way 98, 99% of the time, but have different population bases and different representation structures. All of this is going to, I think, make the conflict between Black and brown people, politicians, voters, more acute at a time when we need to focus on the bigger picture, which is there's a Republican takeover that is pitting Black and brown communities against each other.
What you're describing, I know very well, and it worries about where it draws the party, because it's going to cause Black and brown. Mike won't say it. What it's going to cause is Black and brown folks to fight each other over power. You're going to have the Black caucus, the Hispanic caucus fighting over a seat. Now, what Mike talked about with Nanette Barragán is a great, great example. When she first ran, it's not the last cycle, like he said, but the first time she ran. She was every Democrat, every Black person, almost every incumbent endorsed a guy named Isidore Hall. He was a state senator. He was the heir apparent. It was Long Beach. It was Black. It was Compton. And Nanette Barragán.
Isidore's a Black legislator.
That's a great point. Yeah, Isidore Hall was Black icon, state senator, had moved his way up from a state rep to a state senator. Like, he was next in line.
Yes.
And he was part of this Black clique there that was supposed to represent Compton. Yeah. Compton, y'all.
Right.
Even folks in New York understand Compton is the Black part of LA, or it was, but guess what? Lots of Latinos are now. And Nanette Barragán somehow in the top two system makes it into the final two. She only got 22% of the vote, finished a distant second, but realized that there were 2 or 3 other Latinos running with her, and that all coupled together was a majority. She fires her consultants after her primary and hires a young, strapping, good-looking Chuck Rocha to come in the general, and we put together a plan to maximize what Mike Madrid's talking about. It was the first time I'd worked on a congressional race really that intimately, and it was like, that could happen in Maxine Waters' district now if somebody did it.
Correct. It will happen.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I'm saying
right.
All these power structures are about to change because all of the voters underneath them are very, very different than when Maxine Waters was first elected to Congress. And so as the Democratic Party's political class starts to age out, the whole framework under which they got elected a generation ago, those rules don't apply anymore. And so there's going to be these tensions to say, what happens to Black representation that Black politicians rightfully and voters fought for during the civil rights era, when Latinos start to move in and say, wait a second, we're bigger now too. We may not have the same concerns. They're very similar, but it's our turn. And the Black-brown struggle is going to be a very very defining feature, I think, of the next decade. There'll be a lot of Chuck Rochas hired to take on some of these challengers in new seats.
Primaries is where anyway, the primaries will be a lot of the places where this will happen, especially if the Supreme Court just. So stay tuned. This is the in the weeds nerdy shit you're only going to hear here, but it's probably the most underreported thing. And nobody likes to talk about black and brown, as Mike would say, tension. But that shit's going to be real when you're fighting only a few seats, because they're going to eliminate a lot of seats. The only other thing I'll say about all of this is they're assuming, Mike says this a lot, they're assuming that the voters will continue to act on the pattern that they're voting now. So this also come back to bite them in their ass with Latinos, with blacks, with young folks, because a lot can change in 10 years. A lot can change in 5. So stay tuned. Mike, I want to really make a hard turn. I'm not going to say a left or a right with the topics, because the next big thing that's happened, and you are our global Latino Vote podcast correspondent. How about that? Because you can actually find Israel on a map and I cannot. So you get to be the global correspondent.
Yeah.
And I want to know what your thoughts are about Donald Trump has now told me that there's going to be peace in the Middle East, that he's got it all figured out, that little Jared Kushner went over there and got all this stuff done.
Yeah.
I just want to know what you think that this means. And I give the president credit. Like I belittle it, but I am happy that we have got a ceasefire. But you are the one who's kind of followed all of this. And what is your take?
Look, this has been the conflict that has defined the international conflict that has defined the world's balance of power for longer than any of us have been alive. And look, you've got to give credit where credit is due. There is, for the moment, and I've understood a lot of this, and by the time this is recording and aired, this may be a different story. But for the moment, Hamas, as I understand it, has already kind of broken some of the peace agreements, and we may be devolving again into violent conflict. Having said that, anytime there is peace, I don't care who the peacemaker is, and children are no longer dying, you've got to give some credit where it is due. However, that doesn't come without caveats and in a blanket way. And what I mean by that is this. I was speaking with a gentleman yesterday about this conflict, and I've studied this region. I have been to Israel. I studied this at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown in the 90s. This conflict is fascinating to me. I had very close Palestinian friends. I had very close Israeli friends at the School of Foreign Service. I was there when Rabin was shot and assassinated. I was on campus.
You were in the country?
No. I was at Georgetown with my Arab and Jewish friends who are from those countries, from those regions. So it's a conflict that again has defined a big part of my international understanding and experience. That's what I was studying at Georgetown. Having said that, I think it is a little bit disingenuous, and it's not talked about enough, that the United States essentially allowed the Israelis to go in and wipe out the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of thousands of people, guys, were killed or are still bodies laying under rubble. Like a massive amount of their infrastructure, buildings, homes, water, hospitals have been just completely wrecked and decimated. Children are starving. All of those stories, all of that's going on. And then to then come in and suggest you're the peacemaker, I think it's a little disingenuous. Like I'm grateful for the peace, and I don't, like I said, I this conflict, you've never heard Mike Madrid definitively say one way or the other what this is, what this isn't, and I'll tell you why. I'm not on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side. I'm on the side of innocent children. When you're both wrong, you're both wrong. And don't tell me you're not both wrong, because you are. You're both right and you're both wrong. And at a certain point, when you're playing zero sum with your children and other people's children, and innocents are dying at the scale that we're talking about, I'm not going to be saying you're wrong and you're wrong. Y'all are wrong. If I'm using y'all correctly, I don't know if I'm using, but y'all.
That's the right vernacular. That's the vernaculars.
Y'all are wrong. Okay?
Y'all are two. All of y'all are more than two. Maybe it's all y'all.
All y'all are wrong.
There we go.
Yeah. With the incredible dramatic loss of life, I don't care what your historical claim is. I don't care who shot first. I don't care who did what. And In what way? I don't care. Like, we are so past that. You got to quit killing innocent people. We're way past that. So this is the first time I'm talking about this really in a public way. All I will say is this, Chuck. I think it is. I'm grateful for peace as long as it lasts. Whatever circumstances, we've got to get back to the negotiating table and dealing with this in a civilized fashion. But you can't tell me that this is somehow like what we saw when Rabin was making peace in the Middle East and compromising and giving up a whole lot with the Palestinian people and vice versa. I'm not going to take anything away from the Palestinians in the peace deals during the Clinton years. That was peace. This is, let me just decimate you, kill hundreds of thousands of people, wipe out your entire region, and then take credit for making peace after there's nothing left. Like, I don't, that just seems a little disingenuous to me. I don't know how you feel about the whole situation. What are your thoughts?
I don't have many thoughts. Mine are more elementary than yours, right? Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to see war. I've always think that peace is the right answer. And when children are getting killed, when folks, it's like the immigration stuff, right? Like, if a child gets brought here by its parents and it didn't, you're saying that child's illegal. He didn't have a choice. The child that's getting killed in Palestine or in Israel didn't have a choice. They're just trying to live, right? And so that's where I look. If there's peace, I'm always going to be a fan of peace. But also, whatever we're doing, we should make sure that it don't create the same conditions that caused this thing to do what it did this last time. You burn your hand on a stove, you turn the handle the other way the next time you're cooking because you don't want to burn yourself. So I look at this very elementary. Keep in mind, I'm watching the Jesus movie on the internet, and I still haven't figured out how Christians could hate Jesus when he is Jewish, when we were saying Jews won't replace us. And I'm like, Jesus is a Jew. I just found this out on the Netflix, for God's sakes.
That's why I love my friendship with Chuck, because as he watches all this historical stuff, he's like, wait a second, did you know this? It's like, yeah, I did know that.
So anyway, I'm happy that there's peace in the Middle East. I want to talk about another article, and this will be one of our last topics before we get out of here today. And we talked last week about this crazy text message that was blowing up in Virginia that they're making ads about, where the Attorney General Democratic candidate was making a joke about killing the Speaker of the House. And he's come out and said he didn't mean it and he was joking, and that's fine. I'm sure he was. I don't think he would kill anybody, and he's running for Attorney General, for God's sakes. But it was stupid. It may disqualify him and all the things, because people, don't be texting shit you don't ever want to tell somebody out loud on a public speaker, because Politico yesterday released an article of all of these text messages over several years of this young Republican club of folks between the ages of 18 and 40 that said some really disgusting things about black people, comparing them to monkeys and talking about rape as something that was more or less acceptable. And like, I have said and done some stupid shit in my life and openly admitted and begged for forgiveness. But I don't think I've ever said anything that bad on a text message. For all you kids, before I turn over to Mike, don't ever text anything that you wouldn't tell your preacher to his face. That's all I'm going to say. Mike, your take.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's part of this new world that we're all a part of. And like I said, there's some, I'm constantly taken aback at, like, it wasn't one flippant comment. That's the whole thing.
It went on in a string of everybody reacting to it, like a race to the bottom.
Yeah, and it was dozens of people from all over the country, the leadership of these organizations. These weren't high school kids. These were 30-year-old staffers, consultants, advisors that know better and frankly didn't care. There was somebody at the end, the last string, that said, if this ever got out or made public, we'd all be cooked for real, for real. Like, they knew what they were doing, right? And the juxtaposition of the whataboutism and they're worse than we are with, you brought the story last week to me about the Attorney General candidate in Virginia who was talking about political violence, the inability of the Vice President of the United States to take a position and say that this should be denounced because, what the Attorney General candidate in Virginia did was far worse. Like, that's just horrible coarsening of our discourse. But the same goes for Democrats who aren't, like, I think Spamberger, the candidate, she's going to win that race. I know she's trying to, get as much pickup for her party as possible, but she can't denounce her attorney general, candidate on the ticket saying that, this guy, these Republicans should be shot in the head twice in front of his children. Like, that's not acceptable either. And there are so many levels. There's so many lessons. The texting one that you mentioned is the first one, right? That's the first thing that is the first lesson. Is it's going to assume it's all going to come out if you're in public life. The second is the flippant way that we talk about political violence in this country is, like I said, this was not a one-time comment that can be forgiven. This was going on for years with dozens of people in leadership. And when the young Republicans, remember, young Republicans is not high school kids. It's not college kids. Those are the college Republicans. Young Republicans are people under 40 years old. They're basically 30-year-old mid-level professionals who are political staffers, chiefs of staff, and campaign consultants who are very influential in the party structure. I'm not going to say that I was surprised. I'm disappointed. I am a little bit heartbroken that it's this pervasive, but I'm not surprised, man. I'm not. I would have been 20 years ago, but I'm not surprised now that there's a whole generation of young political leadership in the Republican Party where this is just par for the course. This is not one-off comments. This is not just a bunch of drunk guys locker room talk about, football stuff. This was really bad, awful race to the bottom, gas chamber talk, dropping the N bomb, talking about rape, how much people hate, gay people in what states. It's just, like I said, it was long, it was pervasive. It's part of the culture that has emerged in our politics, and it's deeply, deeply troubling.
Yep. And I think that it's a lesson for all of you out there that listen to this. You all have got kids, and look, joking is joking, and I joke too much myself, but these ain't jokes, and you should be thinking about what you're texting. This is going to be a lightning round. Mike, I got a couple more things I want to ask your opinion on today. And one is yesterday, this morning, as we're recording on Wednesday morning, a Latina state rep in Texas has announced her candidacy for governor. Her name is Gina Hinojosa.
Oh.
If that name sounds familiar, her father was the longtime state party chairman.
Oh.
And if Gina Hinojosa also sounds like Xochitl Hinojosa from CNN, it's her sister.
No kidding.
So Gina comes from a political family in Austin. She's been a state rep. Before that, she ran for school board because they were trying to close her school in Austin. I don't know if she could win. I don't know if she can raise money, but she's been around and knows how this shit works. And I'd ask you to check out her launch video on the Twitters this morning as you look at this. But a Latina running for governor of Texas, Mike.
Two things. Let's put that clip of her video in the comment section below. Let us know what your thoughts are, guys. We'll put the video in there. Let us know. We also need to get Gina on the show. I know we were going to try to Adelita Grijalva's pretty.
She's going to come on
now.
Next week. Miss Grijalva's going to be on next week. And y'all should all know she has not been sworn in yet.
Unbelievable. It's going to be a fascinating interview because my guess is she will not be sworn in by next week. By the time we have her on the show, it will be after the No Kings rally, which is designed to and expected to be the largest public protest, political protest in the country's history, Saturday. So if you are so inclined, get out there, take some pictures, send them in to us. We'll post some of the activities from around the country below in the comments section. I know Chuck's going to be out there waving the flag, driving people. Maybe not. I don't know. I shouldn't say that.
I think I'm going fishing Saturday, but whatever.
Chuck's got other priorities. I will probably be out there in Sacramento taking some pictures, getting some video. So we'll pull all of that stuff together. But Gina Hinojosa, we're going to talk about that. Latina candidate for governor of Texas, throws her hat into the ring. It's going to be a fascinating primary out there. And we are going to also try to talk to Adelita Grijalva, who I guess technically is a congresswoman-elect until she's sworn in.
I talked to her the other day, and she's like, I had to quit my job to run for Congress because she was a county commissioner, right? And she is not a rich woman. She's like, I need them to swear me in because my family needs a paycheck. This is my job. I'm not a rich person. Like right. She is unemployed until they put her in so she can literally draw money to pay her family. Think about that. We don't think about that as law. We think all these people are rich. She quit a job as a county commissioner because she can't run for both. county commissioners in Arizona probably make, 70, 80 grand, whatever they make. And because she was providing for her family. Anyway, it's something we're definitely going to ask her about. My last topic going out is, as we talked about last week, guess who has announced their Maine Senate bid? The governor, Mills, did in fact announce this week, Mike, like you said she would do, to run against Graham Plattner in the primary against Susan Collins in Maine. But this is the part I wanted to tell you about in case you weren't following it, Mike, is that the DSCC, the Senate Campaign Committee, said they're staying out of the primary, but FEC filings would show that they've set up a joint fundraising committee with Miss Mills. That hit the Twitter yesterday.
I want to ask you your opinion on this. Do you want to go?
No.
Okay, I'll take it then. Let me. There's a couple things I want to talk about in the main race. And Graham Plattner is. I wrote about him on my Substack. Him and James Tallarico. I think that they're both. Cool. I think that they're both very uniquely authentic voices that can work on the Democratic Party that's struggling right now with its establishment. Its establishment structure that is trying to prevent a new generation of voices coming in. Okay, the governor is a friend of Susan Collins. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's great that senators and governors from different parties can get along. She's 78, 79 years old. She's in her late 70s. Like, here's the Democrats again, adding to their generational problems. But look, the Democrats smell a pickup in Maine, and they need Maine. You've got to pick up Maine if you're going to get into contention to get a majority in what should otherwise be a very good Democratic year. Maine's tough, by the way, though. Mainers, that's what they're called, Mainers, know Susan Collins. A lot of it, even if they don't like her, they know her personally because it's that size of a state. She's been around that long and has just worked it where she knows everybody in there. I was with the Lincoln Project in 2020 when we were dropping millions of dollars on Susan Collins' head, beating the living crap out of her, ripping the bark straight off of her with some really, really rough, brutal ads. Maybe we overshot, I don't know, but she was reelected pretty soundly in a year that we should have been able to take her out. She's a tough Mainer to beat. Maine is a unique place. Mills can probably do it, but I also believe that Graham Plattner, this upstart oyster farmer who's not political at all, is a fresh new face with an anti-establishment message that is speaking directly to working class concerns. And people have to understand something about Maine. This is working class. It's not all Kennebunkport, man. New England is not just a bunch of, rich, wealthy, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, second and third homes. This is working.
Did they fight the Vikings? Oh, my bad.
This is an oyster farmer. Like, this guy's
a veteran.
And a veteran. I mean, this is working class. Vermont, the Burlington Coat Factory is Burlington, Vermont is where they made, coats. Like, this is old textile mills. Like Bernie Sanders.
LL Beam is from Maine.
LL Beam. These are manufacturing, work with your hands, gritty blue collar working class folks. And that's largely what Maine is, by the way. So I say that all because hats tip to the governor and her staff, who have clearly encouraged and pushed to get into this Senate race. And what they said is, we're only doing it if we are glued to the hip of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. We're both going to deny it. We're both going to say it ain't happening. But this is absolutely Chuck Schumer and the Democrats saying, we're going to give you whatever you want to get into this race, while this young upstart is raising millions and millions and millions of dollars online. And you're going to have a battle, yet again, a generational battle between Democrats who won't hang up the cleats and these young, frustrated, working class folks who are saying, you say you want working class people, but you're still putting in these octogenarians, there's a word for you, Chuck, 80-year-old folks and plus that are just Andrew Cuomoizing the party. Like, at a certain point, you have to realize that people under 50 can't relate. People under 50 can't relate to these people. So that's why you've got a working class problem. That's why you've got a youth problem. That's why you've got a people of color problem, is because you keep putting up these ancient statues as candidates in your party, and you wonder why you're getting your ass kicked with these demographics. That's why. I think Graham, and again, I think Graham's a tougher candidate than people think he is. I think that the Democratic establishment is frightened to death the way they are of Zoran Mamdani, the way they are of an AOC, the way they are. And I don't agree with their politics or their policies anyway, but politically, my God, like it's time for the Democratic Party to have an upheaval. Have your Tea Party moment, fellas. Grab your flowers, get on stage, flip the card table over, and start running with some values and be authentic, because that's where you're going to get those people back. The future ain't Andrew Cuomo. It ain't Governor Mills. It's not Nancy Pelosi. It's not. That's not the future. Stop it.
You know what some would call Graham Plattner? He's the leader we deserve. That's right. David Hogg is in this race, and he is in backing the damn oyster farmer. This David Hogg just pops up, and then there we go. Now we got some money and some things happening over there. I hear you, David. I reached out to him this week after our podcast, and I have said I'm setting up a meeting over there because you know what? I'm a consultant he deserves is what I am. Him and my crew are the consulting class that he deserves. So I'm going to, all my staff are under the age of 34. Every one of them, even the equity partners. And I was like, you know what? If you had young consultants, he's like, absolutely. So we're meeting with them. We look forward to that meeting. We are now down to the shutdown number for all of you who've been commenting. This is great giveaway. We call it the Latino Vote Executive VIP gift package that we're going to be giving out to those who get the closest to the number. It's like in the old days when the folks used to run numbers house to house. That's what we're doing here is we're running numbers.
That is not what we're doing here.
Well, it's not what we're doing here. We are just having a contest to give you some books and a T-shirt if you get close to the number. And the number is the days of the shutdown. As I come to you live today, I think we're on day 15 or 16. It may be 17 by the time you listen to it. So we're creeping closer to the Chuck Rocha 4-week, 1 month timeline. Mike had the under, I had the over. For those of you out there who's going to get the closest to, we're going to give you the VIP gift package. So make sure you're putting the comments in. We're going to have Congresswoman, hopefully elect Adelita Grijalva next week. I've also, Mike, reached out to our good senator from the great state of California, Alex Padilla, telling him that we want him on shortly after November at some point.
Great.
To do that, because I can follow directions. To all my boys back in Texas, it was great to see y'all and all of my family. For those of you listening, don't forget to smash that like button. That's what they're saying now, Mike. Smash that like button. Smash that like button. I've been looking at this AI monkey that's a Jamaican on the internet. It's called Jaw Monkey. That's my new thing. I love looking at the Jaw Monkey and his donkey. Anyway, I get down a rabbit hole. Y'all forgot to like us. If you lucky enough to still have your mom and dad, please give them a call. Tell them you love them. Until next week, y'all be good.